My name is Juliana. I'm 18 years old. While many people my age are thinking only about parties, friends, and the future, my biggest concern has always been one thing: my father, Jubileu. Ever since I was very little, he's always been by my side. We had a special connection, the kind that doesn't even need words to understand. He did everything he could to protect me and make sure I was happy. To me, he was more than a father. He was my hero. I remember his strong demeanor, his big hands calloused from working so hard. He would spend the whole day working hard, but all he had to do was see me and he would smile, as if all his tiredness disappeared. And me? I never needed much more than that. His presence was enough to make everything seem right in the world, and he never wanted anything more than my happiness. Time passed. I grew up, he got older. Things changed a little, but one thing stayed the same: his concern for me. Even now, more independent, he never stopped wanting to know if I ate right, if I was studying, if I got home safely. Sometimes, I confess, his constant questions made me a little impatient, but deep down, I knew. It was just love disguised as concern. I was always a calm daughter, and he was a protective father, but above all, he knew how to show affection. His way of saying, "I love you," often didn't come in words, but rather in the hot coffee that was waiting for me in the morning or in the way he helped me with small tasks during the day. He always repeated, "If you're happy, I'm happy." And I knew it was true. Nothing escaped his watchful eye. The type of cereal I liked, the clothes I chose to wear to go out, the subjects I took at school. He made a point of keeping track of everything. But unlike many fathers who become more distant as their children grow up, mine was never like that. He remained present, always close by, as if he knew that, no matter how old I was, deep down, I would always be his little girl. When I turned 18, I saw something different in my father's eyes. He was emotional, and it wasn't just because of the cake and the birthday wishes. He knew that this moment was a milestone, that I was no longer the little girl he had protected so carefully. He was afraid of what would come next, not of losing me, but of seeing our relationship change. Even so, he remained the same: present, affectionate, always supporting me in everything. My father was never a man of luxury or grand gestures, but he had a heart as big as the world. His hard work never took away from him the sweetness of making me feel special every day. What I loved most about him was the way he listened to me. No matter what I wanted to talk about, a silly problem, a crazy dream, or a fear I couldn't explain, he was always there, attentive, without judgment. But the moment that will forever remain in my heart was the night of my 18th birthday. He prepared a special dinner, simple but full of love, just the way he wanted it. And when I thought the surprise was over, he gave me a different gift: a letter. It was just a folded piece of paper, but when I opened it and started reading it, I felt a lump in my throat. In the letter, he wrote everything he might not be able to say out loud: words of love, advice for my adult life, and, above all, a promise. No matter where I was or how old I was, he would always be by my side. The tears came uncontrollably. At that moment, I realized how lucky I was to have someone like that in my life. Because more than a father, more than a hero, he was my home. That night, after reading the letter, my father pulled me into a hug. It wasn't one of those quick, distracted hugs. It was firm, strong, and full of meaning. Without saying a word, he showed me that, even if life took us on different paths, our love would always be there, intact. At that moment, I understood something that I had perhaps never stopped to think about. My father always took care of me, always protected me, and our bond was stronger than any distance, any change. Today, even though I'm 18, I still feel his presence in everything: in the way I prepare my breakfast, in the songs he used to hum, even in the little lessons he taught me without even realizing it. I know that wherever I am, he will always be rooting for me, concerned if I'm okay, if I'm safe, if I'm happy. And even if time passes and life takes us in different directions, there is one thing that will never change. He will always be my father, and I will always be his daughter. Because he taught me that true love is the basis of everything, that no matter the distance, time, or changes in life, there are bonds that never break. As long as we have each other, as long as there are memories, gestures, and affection, nothing will ever be missing. And so we continued, together, even if sometimes we went our separate ways, but always connected by what really matters: love. The days went by, and with them, life began to adjust. I was no longer that little girl who needed my father to hold my hand to cross the street, but in a way I always needed him. Even when I said I could manage on my own, there was always that little voice in my head reminding me of his advice. Take a coat. It might get cold. Don't be back late. If you need me, just call. At first, I thought these phrases were a bit repetitive, as if he didn't trust me to handle it. But after a while, I realized that it wasn't a lack of trust. It was love. It was his way of being there even when I was no longer under the same roof. When I moved to start college, I felt the weight of this change. The house where I grew up was gone, as were the mornings when he would wake me up with a ready-made coffee. The silence of my new home felt strange, and the lack of his presence made me realize how accustomed I had become to always having him around. In the early days, he would call me every night. He would ask if I had eaten well, if I was adjusting, if I needed anything. Deep down, I knew he just wanted to hear my voice, to make sure I was okay. Sometimes I would laugh, amused by his concern. Other times, I would feel a tightness in my chest, missing that strong hug that made me feel safe. The first visit I made back home was emotional. When I opened the door, I saw my father standing there, with that smile mixed with relief. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms and wrapped me in a tight hug. At that moment, all the longing I didn't want to admit disappeared. We spent that weekend talking about everything and nothing at the same time. He wanted to know how classes were going, if I had made friends, if I was enjoying the new routine. I could see in his eyes the pride in seeing me grow up, but also a hint of sadness at realizing that time was passing too quickly. Time kept passing, and our relationship adjusted to this new phase. Daily calls became weekly, then bi-weekly. But whenever I called, he answered on the first ring, as if he had been waiting for that moment. One time, during a difficult time in college, I felt lost. The demands, the pressure, the uncertainties of the future, everything seemed too much for me. That's when I picked up the phone and called him, without even knowing exactly what I wanted to say. I just wanted to hear his voice. "Dad." My voice came out weak. He didn't ask anything, nor did he press me to explain. He just said, "I'm here." And that was all I needed to hear. Time passed and I got used to adult life, but I always took with me everything he taught me. In the small choices of everyday life, in the moments when I had to make important decisions, I always asked myself, what would my father do? Even from afar, he was still present. Every piece of advice, every story, every gesture of affection he gave me over the years became a part of me. He was no longer holding my hand like when I was a child, but in a way, he never stopped guiding me. Today, when I think of him, I don't just miss him. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for having had a father who loved me so unconditionally, who prepared me for life without ever making me feel alone. And I know that no matter where the future takes me, there will always be a place where I can return. A hug waiting for me. A voice on the phone ready to listen to me. A love that time will never be able to erase. Because some bonds are never broken. Some loves are eternal, and my father will always be my home.